So I came across this tweet from a former Packers defensive tackle Mike Daniels, who played with the Packers from 2012 to 2018. He responded to this on Twitter, which was originally posted by Ike Packers Podcast on February 22nd. They said yes or no to Devin White in Green Bay. Sideline to sideline linebacker, just turned 26. Started 75 games in 5 seasons with Tampa Bay, 566 tackles. And then Mike Daniels, former Packer, says this: the Packers are moving to a 4-3. If they bring Devin White into play next to Campbell, you might as well start fitting Kenny Clark for his gold jacket. Then he also responded to this comment. Someone else said here, King Day _ said Quay and White greater than Quay and Campbell. And then Mike Daniels said, and hear me out, they play all 3 guys because a 4-3 scheme has 3 linebackers. So it sounds like Mike Daniels would be in favor of bringing in Devin White, who is going to be a free agent. Devin White was originally a first-round pick, 5th overall back in 2019, and he had some good moments in his time with Tampa Bay the past 5 or so seasons, but all in all, he's been not great when you look at his total productivity. You look at PFF, I honestly haven't seen a player who I feel like is as highly regarded as he is because of him being, I think, a top 5 draft pick in the league. He has some pretty bad PFF grades. If you look at 2019, 51, 2020, 48.1. First one was 51.9. 2021, 35.1. 2022, 43.7, 40, and then 2023, 47.4. And his worst graded area of his game by PFF is his run defense, with 2023 being 31.4, 2022 being 36.7, and his best part of his game is probably his pass rush, where he's had some pretty solid grades, 63, around 71, 66, 81. So he seems to be a solid pass rusher, not very good against the run. And I remember back when the Packers played the Bucs back in 2020, when the Bucs go on to win the Super Bowl, and Devin White had a stretch of some really, really good games in the playoffs. And I honestly haven't followed the Buccaneers too closely, so I was trying to see what the Buccaneers fans sort of think of Devin White, how they feel about him probably leaving Tampa Bay, unless they gave him a new contract, which it maybe doesn't seem like they will. And you could tell that most Tampa Bay fans don't really seem to view him in the highest regard. They sort of mentioned that stretch in the playoffs when they won the Super Bowl, how well he was playing, but outside of that, they said he's been pretty inconsistent, not great in coverage, not great versus the run. And so I'm not sure if bringing in Devin White is the best idea. Maybe because he's struggled a little bit at times, you can get him for cheaper than you would a typical, first round number 5 overall selection. But still, he hasn't been incredibly productive in the past few seasons. And I want to read here from ProFootballRumors.com. They sort of summed him up right here. With free agency approaching, the Buccaneers have key decisions to make with several pending free agents. Linebacker Devin White is set to see his contract expire, but a new Tampa Bay agreement should not be expected. The former 5th overall pick sought out a massive extension last offseason, and he requested a trade when talks on that front did not yield an agreement. Little interest was shown around the league, and White ultimately played out the 2023 campaign. He found himself splitting time with KJ Britt down the stretch, however, and he did not start either of the Bucs' postseason contests. A departure in free agency would come as no surprise at this point. And that was written by Adam LaRose, ProFootballRumors.com. So apparently he was splitting time with KJ Britt later in the season, and it sounds like last offseason he didn't have a ton of teams interested. And I saw one report, can't remember the site, where he was maybe looking for something around, if it was accurate, 4 years, $100 million last offseason. And I think with his play now, I think that he's not going to make anywhere near that kind of money. And so maybe the Packers can get him on a sort of bargain of a contract for a former, top 5 pick. Maybe Brian Gutekunst sees something special there, because I feel like we've seen in times past, Brian Gutekunst is able to find some of these players who maybe haven't performed well in a couple seasons. For example, Rasul Douglas being on a practice squad, the fact that he was there and no other NFL team saw that potential. Sometimes the Packers are able to find guys who they think they can help get to the next level. And I don't know if Devin White would fit that mold. But if the Packers make the move, I assume they can get him for a somewhat reasonable contract. I just don't know if it's the best idea, considering he hasn't been very productive as of late. And when we look at the Packers in their middle linebacker situation, it does, with the Packers now going to have 3 middle linebackers in the 4-3. Of course, the NFL is a lot of nickel these days, so it won't be probably a majority of the time. But still, the Packers need to add some depth there. Brian Gutekunst has mentioned it in the past few weeks. And there's also some speculation about Devondre Campbell. Will he return? I believe he is designated as a post-June 1st release. You save around $10 or so million against the Packers salary cap. If you don't do the post-June 1st release, it's about, I think, 2.6-ish million, if I remember correctly. And so if the Packers wanted to save cap space, they could release Devondre Campbell. But I was debating it earlier this morning. And, looking at Devondre Campbell, the past few seasons, he hasn't been quite as good as his All-Pro 2021 season. And 2021, he played in all 16 games. But then if you look at 2022, 13 games. Last year, only 11 games. So he has been dealing with some more injuries. He is 30 years old. And so he has, I think, declined a little bit. I think that partly has to do with his injuries. And I know last season, near the end of the season, there was that talk about Campbell not wanting to play anymore. It seemed like he had been playing through some injuries. And so maybe if he returns fully healthy, he can be productive here in this Packers unit. And maybe because there isn't a ton of depth at linebacker here in Green Bay, he stays. Maybe they can rework his contract potentially, if that's possible. But Campbell, if we look here from Bill Huber, Sports Illustrated, said this about his decline in production. Moreover, Campbell has been unable to rekindle the magic from his 2021 All-Pro season, a dominant performance that earned him a 5-year, $50 million contract in free agency the following offseason. In 16 games in 2021, Campbell had 102 tackles, 2 interceptions, or solo tackles, 2 interceptions, 5 passes defended, and 2 forced fumbles. In 24 games the past 2 seasons, he had 102 solo tackles, 2 interceptions, 4 passes defended, and 0 forced fumbles. And if we look at the Packers' overall linebacker situation, Quay Walker, definitely going to be a key piece on this defense. Devondre Campbell, Isaiah McDuffie, Christian Young was signed to a futures contract, and then you have Eric Wilson and Christian Welch as free agents. So the Packers are going to have to make some moves at linebacker. I would expect them to draft some linebackers in this draft. And then if you look at free agency, I wouldn't be surprised if they added one in free agency. I'm not sure. Devin White would, be one of the guys Gutekunst wants to come in here. But I always enjoy seeing what former Packers and former NFL players had to say about certain situations. So that is it for this one. Thank you for watching as always. If you want to stay up to date with all things Packers, feel free to subscribe down below. You can also listen to this on Spotify, iTunes, and a few other podcast places. Just search Packers Southern Scoop Podcast. But that's all for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.